leftovers, or the DMV,
number 97,
or house cleaning, or Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
In 1967, Joseph Stalin's only daughter flees Russia for her new home, America.
Hello to everybody. I am very happy to be here.
That story alone is worthy of a podcast, but Svetlana is about what comes next, and it's the craziest story I've ever heard. It has KGB agents, a Frank Lloyd Wright commune, weird sex stuff, 3 Olgas, 2 Svetlanas, and 1 neurotic gay playwright. That's me. Listen to Svetlana on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
When my daughter ran off to hop trains, I was terrified I'd never see her again, so I followed her into the train yard.
This is what it sounds like inside the boxcar.
And into the city of the rails. There I found a surprising world, so brutal and beautiful that it changed me. But the rails do that to everyone.
There is another world out there, and if you want to play with the devil, you're going to find them there in the rail yard.
I'm Danelle Morton. Come with me to find out what waits for us in the City of the Rails. Listen to City of the Rails on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or cityoftherails.com.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.
Howdy, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I'm your host, Ray Harkins. Thank you for joining us on another insightful discussion with people in and around the independent music scene, whether it's them playing in bands themselves, whether it's them doing other cool stuff like putting out records or taking photos or whatever, or what I like to call the secret punks. These are the people who have been in our awesome music scene and, maybe have not pursued it to the fullest extent of, people that are normally on this show, but have taken those principles, everything they've learned from the DIY, punk, hardcore, indie rock scene, and then applied it to their lives later on. But this person, whoa, I'm so excited I'm hitting my computer. This person is the true embodiment of an artiste, and I don't use that word lightly. Josh Scogin. He plays in 68. He also played in the Chariot. Plays in Norma Jean. Well, not plays like currently, but played in Norma Jean. And he's been a conversation I've been wanting to have for quite some time because, frankly, I worship at that dude's altar in the sense of all of the music that he has done. I've been a fan of, to varying degrees, but I've always really, really appreciated what he's done, how he's expressed himself. And I was excited to have this convo with him because, the 68 have a new record coming out, if I'm not mistaken, in the next couple weeks. And that's exciting. And 68, they basically are a hardcore version of the White Stripes. That's how I always describe them, just because they're a two-piece and drums and guitar, that sort of stuff. But that's maybe a very simple way to describe the band. But they're the real deal, and they are awesome. So, but let's get some business pleasantries out of the way, and then we'll deal with Josh and reckon with the force that he is. But first. Rise Against. If you've been listening to the show, you've been hearing me talk about their new record, and it's unbelievable. And they have a new record coming out. It's called Wolves. You need to pre-order it now. Just go ahead and just press pause, visit the riseagainstshop.com website, and you'll be able to pre-order the record Wolves. They have a single out right now. You can kind of sample it on any streaming service that you'd like. But the record is great. They're on tour with Deftones and Thrice all throughout the summer, which is a show that you're just like, my brain can't even wrap its head around how awesome it is that all of those bands are going out together. It's just so much cool stuff going on with that band. And they're the real deal. Rise Against have been doing it forever, and they are absolutely incredible at what they do. So please, riseagainstshop.com, pre-order that record. And then also another amazing service I've been pleading with you to try because I think you will really, really enjoy it. Symbol FM. So you can go to symbol.fm and you will be able to, download it to your phone and your whatever device you are using to, listen. Well, I was about to say whatever device you're listening to music on. No, you can't download that to your iPod. But any iOS system, you'll be able to download this thing. And I'm fairly certain they have an Android app as well. And if I'm speaking out of turn, then I apologize, and maybe I'll get slapped by my friend Charlie, who does stuff at Symbol, and be like, Ray, we don't have an Android app. But anyways, I know for myself, I use it on my iPhone, and it is awesome. Basically, it's the easiest way to share music with your friends. And like I said, basically you pick a track and you're like, you know what, I want people to listen to this thing. And, it's very much like any other social media property in the sense of, you got a feed and you can scroll through and kind of listen to what your other friends are listening to. But what I really enjoy doing is basically playing a compilation of all the tracks that I've published because, it's just fun because I can go back and be like, oh, yeah, that's right. I was listening to that record a lot a couple weeks ago. But you can follow me on Symbol FM at XPurposeX and, follow me. And then we can trade music and talk about how cool this particular track or whatever is. So, do it up. Symbol FM, awesome stuff. And then I have to tell you about this other awesome podcast that's a part of the Jabberjaw network called Oh Marks a Spot. A lot of my good friends do this show, and basically it's a peek behind the scenes of what it takes to actually run a record label. It's not just like the very broad strokes and overviews of what it is to do a record label. It's like, hey, this is how you put stuff into production, and it gets into the real nitty-gritty details. So it's cool because for anyone that's looking for a more behind-the-scenes approach of what it is to work at a record label, this is the deal. So my friend Mike Mowry, my friend Lance Rowe, my friend Susie Lee, they all do this, and they all have a variety of different roles at the label, and it's a very, very good distillation of it. So please go check that out. If you are a music industry nerd such as myself, you will love that particular show. And thanks, Oh Marks a Spot. So like I said, Josh Scogin is he's been a name looming large in my list. I've actually got a lot of people on Twitter that have hit me up in regards to saying that they being me, I should have him on the show. And finally we were able to make it happen. And he was just a great Southern gentleman, like he portrays himself to be. That is who he actually is. So, I don't have anything more to say beyond you just need to listen to all of his bands. Like, he really hasn't put out a dud as far as I'm concerned. So, there we go. That is what Josh is up to. And here is the discussion that I had with him over one pleasant afternoon while I was in California and he was hanging out. I can't remember where. He was at home, I'm fairly certain. Which home I think is in Georgia. Yeah, we got that. Anyways, here's Josh, and I will talk to you after the episode's over. I don't think we actually met when we were on tour together, which is weird because, that happens sometimes where you do like a week worth of dates and like, you don't actually meet everybody in all the bands just because it's, so chaotic. But yeah, sure. I think it was, so we played Rock Island, Illinois at like a total, VFW hall scenario. And so we picked up on tour with you guys, Bleeding Through, Every Time I Die. And I think Beloved jumped on the bill too. But it was one of those things where it was like I was already familiar with your band. I was excited to play some shows with you guys, but then watching you guys was just like it like you didn't care about anything in regards to making sure that like your music was like as crystal clear as possible. You just the volume the volume was the most important thing, and you were you were throwing yourselves around all over the place. In certain respects, I'm presuming that the live presentation was very intentional as far as like, we just want to be as chaotic as possible, or was that simply just the zones that you guys got in once you started playing?
Well, it was definitely it was intentional in the sense that we wrote music in hopes to push us. It wasn't intentional in the sense of like, we never talked about it or anything. We just always I enjoy recording and stuff, but really we just record so we can play live shows. You know what I mean? Like that was always the emphasis. It's just like let's get this record out so we can tour more. When you think about being in a band, at least me anyway, it was always like, oh man, I can't wait to be on stage playing. It was never like, can't wait to be sitting in a cold studio recording these songs or whatever. And so, as far as like, it was intentional in the sense that like all of our favorite bands at the time were, at the drive-in and, Botch and any band that, just was known for their sort of like performance like that, but like, but yeah, it was great because, we we all grew up together. And so it wasn't anything that ever even had to be discussed. It was just like, oh, we are friends first, and then we just like started a band. And so it was just pretty known that like, it was all like to be able to play the live show,
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, the expression of the fact that you could just be like, hey, like we're totally uninhibited up here. We're, drooling over ourselves and throwing our guitars around. Like that doesn't matter because, at the end of the day, like this music is chaotic and this is how we're expressing it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like it's because a lot of bands, having been doing this for quite a while now, you enter a lot of conversations with people and their thoughts and stuff, and I don't think there's any wrong thought on it, but some people are just like, that's that's a terrible representation of the good music that you've recorded, and that's some people's take on it. It's like, man, you're not even doing that song justice or whatever. But I'm like, my thought, and like, especially all of us at that point and stuff, and even now, it's like, well, if you want like, a perfect representation, like you have the CD, go listen to the CD. Like that's there for a reason, to get to know it or whatever. But if live, it's like, an opportunity presents itself to just leap in the crowd, and like maybe the riff gets a little sloppy. It's like, I don't know, like to me, that's fine, because it's like that opportunity will never come again. Like, sure, maybe in the next city, a similar opportunity arises, but at the end of the day, it's like, it wasn't that city, it wasn't that crowd, it wasn't that time, it wasn't, so for me and for all of us at the time, it's just like, this is the expression. Like I said, like you just record more albums so you can tour more and people show up, maybe, that's the hope anyway. And so like the live thing is always like the first priority. And then, how do we play more live shows? Well, you record albums, so.
Right. You get new music out there in order to get people to come to the shows. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you are a born and bred and tried and true Southern gentleman, as I am describing you. You don't maybe have to view yourself as such, but there's something that is so inherently tied to Southern pride and being from there. Where specifically were you born, and kind of like where did you come up? Was it in Alabama or where?
Atlanta, Georgia, born and raised. Yeah.
And so what was your family structure like? Like mom and dad in the house, brothers and sisters?
I had an older brother, 6 years older, and and then I had two parents, mom and dad, and they were all, it was a good, supportive kid, like childhood growing up, my brother being 6 years older, I always, wanted to do the opposite of him. And so like, he was like, I remember him, getting into like rap and hip hop and that sort of stuff. And I remember him like, throwing this cassette tape away and like just being like, I don't even understand, whatever, just like not into that. And so I remember like grabbing it and just being like, basically in my mind, like if he hates this, I love it, and it turned out to be like the Bleach album, cassette tape, by Nirvana. So it's like, obviously I was like young enough to not really know why I cared, but it was just like, whatever this is, I like it, and he was into like a whole nother world. And then, like, it's funny because, fast forward X amount of years, I had to like admit to him that I actually did like the Beastie Boys, even though I like had to pretend I hated them because that's what he loved, so.
Totally.
But yeah, I had the Bleach cassette tape at a hilariously young age, strictly based on the fact that, that he was not into it, and he's like, yeah, you can understand what you're saying or whatever, and I mean, in some ways that definitely maybe sculpted, where I am and who I am and that sort of thing, but yeah, I mean, that was like me as a kid. So
yeah, well, it's interesting because usually, there are people that have, older siblings that kind of, you know, are guideposts for younger siblings, where it's just like, oh, hey, like here's something that's kind of cool that'll make, you know, you look cooler as you go into like, you know, elementary school, junior high or whatever. And it's funny that you took the opposite of that. You're like, yo, whatever he's into, he's zigging, I'm zagging.
Right. Well, I probably would have been in, I mean, it was, you know, it was I probably would have done better just, you know, following in some of his footsteps as far as that's concerned. Because I remember being in school at one point, you know, like specifically this sort of, I don't know, like time stamp of my life where I was just like, man, I think all these dudes like, you know, sort of that rap hip hop stuff. And I'm just like, I've already sort of staked my claim that I'm not into it, you know. And I mean, all this stuff is very like, you know, frivolous, like just sort of you're just saying the words, you know. I didn't have my own sort of like my own thoughts and on it until maybe like I remember like sort of like middle school or late middle school, where, you know, me and my friends really started purposefully digging out, you know, CDs and vinyl, and that's when I sort of that's when I had a reason to, you know, that's the reality of who I became and all that stuff. But as a younger man, it was just more like, I'm just saying these words, really, you know. I don't really know. I couldn't tell you why I liked or disliked this or that, the other. I was just kind of, you know, existing, you know? Yeah.
No, I like that expression, because so many times that's exactly what you do as a kid, because it's just like you read a word or you see something and you're attracted to it. You can't put your finger on why. And then you're like, yeah, I'm that. Right. And then someone like puts you on the spot and is like, oh, why do you like that? And you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. My parents were awesome though, because like my dad was just like, you know, a Southern, like, I mean, he liked really good music, just classic rock and, you know, I mean, you know, Zeppelin and 38 Special and Skinner. I mean, just really good sort of like rock. I mean, you know, in his words, is like, if you can sort of like not in a like bang your head kind of way, but just sort of a way of like, you know, man, if that riff is, you know, popping out of the song, like that's a good song. And again, for no real reason, but just I remember just being like, yeah, like attracted to that, you know, which is hilarious, because it's probably the same reason my brother was, you know, diving into hip hop and stuff, because I'm sure it was somewhat of a, who knows, but, you know, I can't speak for him, but I'm sure it was some sort of rebellion against, you know, that song, you know what I mean? Like him being like, oh, well, my parents like this, so I'm going to like this. And then here I am going flip flop of that, you know, going, well, he likes this, so I'm going to like this stuff, you know, which was maybe in some way, you know, closerly knit to like a, you know, the rock and roll of, I mean, obviously there's a huge stretch between Zeppelin and Nirvana's Bleach album, but maybe they're more connected than, you know, than NWA or something, you know, so
totally.
Who knows? I mean, the mentality might not be, you know, more connected, but at least musically and sonically, it might be more connected. Who knows?
Yeah. What did your parents do for profession?
My dad owned his own business. It was like the specialized construction stuff, and
okay.
So he owned his own business, and my mom worked for McCormick Spices, and she was like a head office lady up there.
Nice.
Yeah, almost as long as I can remember. Yeah, and then yeah, it was cool, because since my dad owned his own business, you know, some seasons he would be super busy and always out and about, and then some slower times of the year or whatever, you know, he was home a lot of times, and, you know, kind of always around and stuff. So it was really nice, and you know, a unique dynamic, as I grew up and realized is a unique dynamic to what a lot of parents have, where, you know, it's just 9 to 5 and that's it. Here it is every single day, nothing different, you know, and I didn't know any different, but, you know, now looking back, it was quite nice to, you know, like during the week, sometimes, you know, he'd just be home the whole time or whatever, and, you know, be able to, like, whatever, take me to school or, you know, pick me up or whatever, you know. So it yeah, it was quite nice.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. And so what kind of kid did you find yourself being as you started to, actually have your own opinions and know why you thought things, as you started to enter high school? Did you, find yourself being like the art kid, the sports kid? Like, where did you find yourself sitting?
Definitely not the sports kid.
Sure.
It was like 7th grade, 8th grade is where I sort of feel like I kind of, I don't know, what do you want to call it? Who cares really? But just, that's where I kind of became who I was going to become. I got into music. I got into, purposely, diving into Nirvana's and Helmet and Unsane and just my first concert ever. It was Bush, Toadies, and Hum, and I just went because I really liked all three of those bands, but it was kind of one of those things like my parents had to drop me off, and it was this kind of somewhat of an arena rock show sort of scenario, and I remember like just kind of going, but because my friend was going, but then all of a sudden it was like, I was blown away, and I remember just being like, I want to do that. Like, I want to do that right there. I want to play on a stage. And from that moment on, I was like, any show I can go to, any show at all. Like, if I can get to it, I want to go to it. I saw bands that I loved. I saw bands that I didn't really care for. It just, that 100% changed my life, and I presume changed my outcome, because, not that I'm done, but, changed where I am today, because I saw that and I was just like, that's amazing, it was that's all me and my friends at the time who were who became Norma Jean and stuff. All of us were just like, this is it. This is what we're going to shows. And so, at the time you're just going to a show, but then you look back on it now and you realize like, man, I saw some great artists, at a great time. I saw the Pumpkins on Melancholy, Infinite Sadness, All Rage on the Evil Empire tour. Like, you got to see a bunch of stuff, but also saw bands that I think I went and saw No Doubt one time, and I don't really care about No Doubt, but it was just like, I remember that was the first time I saw like every band that opened up. Looking back now, it must have been every single crew member. Like, there was this one part where they kicked in, and just every single person on that tour just ran and just stage dove right into the audience. And I remember just being like, this is amazing. Like, and it's hilarious. Yeah, exactly. But it's hilarious because that was the first time I saw that. You know what I mean? It was just like, when I saw Bush or whatever, it's like that show, that band is way more something I was into at the time, but they didn't do that. You know what I mean? And like, I just remember like so many people and just tearing through the stage and then just running and just jumping as far as you can go. And then, the next guy obviously doesn't want to land on that person, so they immediately go a little bit to the right, and it was just chaos. And I remember being like, but it's No Doubt, you know what I mean? They were top 40s, like, yeah. so that was somewhat of a tiniest bit of like little, like hint of, something, and then I remember seeing, I don't remember where the exact connection is, but I remember going to see a band, who knows, and the band opening was really, really good, and the singer was selling their merch, and so I remember being like so young. I had to get dropped off at all these shows, and I remember going back and talking to the guy selling the merch, which was the singer that just performed, and I remember being blown away because obviously, Bush isn't going to do that, or right. Gwen Stefani's, you know what I mean? And so I'm talking to this person, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Atlanta," and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "That's the first time I like understood the concept of local bands." That was the first thing. And so he was like, "Yeah, we're actually performing like 2 months from now, like right here," and all this stuff. So I went, and of course, since they're headlining, it was a way more quote unquote punk rock, lo-fi sort of show, and that's. There it all connects. And then I realized like, whoa, there's shows that are like $10 and $5 and like $8, and like, right. And these little like underground shows and it's a whole lot more just sort of like, you do it what you want, but you also, you sell your own merch, you load in, it's not all like glossy and shiny, you know, and so, yeah, that somewhere along the way connected all to that. And, you know, I fell in love with that even more, because I was just like, this dude was just performing, and here he is talking to me, you know, and
right,
and that's what a great connection.
Yeah, it's those like the moment that you feel, especially when you're coming from an independent music perspective, the moment that you feel the barriers and the facade is broken down, that's when you can actually feel like you have the ability to participate. You know, that's when you feel like
right.
like I not even so much from like, I can get in a band and play, but you're like, I can be like part of this, you know, local show community, and like, yeah, it just opens up your world.
Exactly. And it was everyone up till then, like, no offense to any of the bands, but everyone at that point was untouchable. You know what I mean? Like, you're not gonna touch, you know,
you're not hanging,
any of those
you're
guys.
Not hanging out with
you're not going to touch Billy Corgan.
No.
Yeah, exactly. You're not going to jump up and touch Billy Corgan without real consequences. You know what I mean? But here's this guy who's, you know, handing me a shirt, you know, and I was like, I don't know. Like, looking back on it, it's like that was the first time where I was like, oh, this is just a guy. He lives in Atlanta. He lives in my hometown, and he's performing with some of my favorite bands. And I remember just like, I mean, that, again, just another game changer where I was just like, that's great. You know, that like, this is amazing, because this guy is, you know, talking to me personally, one-on-one. This is a one-on-one thing. And there wasn't a lot of people at that particular show. And so it was just like, it was cool, because it was like, you know, it's funny, because I was about to say, I doubt he remembers who I am, but I went and saw him multiple times. I probably saw him, you know, 6 or 7 times in a row. And we actually did become somewhat friends, you know, and like, it was just funny, because again, that's a whole thing where I was like, this is what I like. This is something I'm into, you know, and just being able to connect on something a larger level than just, you know, I create art and these heads, you know, and bodies just consume my art. You know what I mean? It's like we actually connected on some sort of level where I'm a human and he's a human, and we're exchanging ideas and a conversation, you know, and so it becomes a very much more realistic thing. And, you know, looking back on everything, it's just like, you know, I never wanted to be a facade on stage. I never wanted to pretend on stage, because I just thought it was so taxing to have to get off stage and then still be that cool guy. You know, it's like, yeah. I always just wanted to be me. And if you like it, cool. If you don't, that's cool. But at least when I'm off stage, which is the vast majority of touring and of life, it's like I can still just be that dork that, you know, I'm not putting any sort of like false ideas out there. And then when I'm off stage, you know, I'm good friends with a lot of people, you know, and so like, you know, you're friends with them and you know who they really are. But when they're up on stage, it's like they're this cool guy, and you'll be hanging out with him walking down the street or whatever, and it's just you and this dude, and you're like, yeah, and we're friends. And then all of a sudden, you know, like a couple of people that like their band show up, and all of a sudden it's just like the switch goes on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like,
they shift.
That's cool for them. Like, no, there's no right way or wrong way. But for me, it's like, I don't want that responsibility. Like, I don't want to have to live up to some false expectation forever. You know what I mean? And so it was very nice to just be like, oh, this is just a guy. And, you know, I remember just throughout the years of some things getting bigger, some things getting smaller, and different projects I've done, it's like, it's just nice, because it's just like, I am who I am. And
right.
Leftovers. Or the DMV.
Number 97.
Or house cleaning. Or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I'm Lance Bass, and you may know me from a little band called NSYNC. What you may not know is that when I was 23, I traveled to Moscow to train to become the youngest person to go to space. And when I was there, as you can imagine, I heard some pretty wild stories. But there was this one that really stuck with me. About a Soviet astronaut who found himself stuck in space with no country to bring him down. It's 1991, and that man, Sergei Krikalev, is floating in orbit when he gets a message that down on Earth, his beloved country, the Soviet Union, is falling apart. And now he's left defending the Union's last outpost. This is the crazy story of the 313 days he spent in space. 313 days that changed the world. Listen to The Last Soviet on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
During the summer of 2020, some Americans suspected that the FBI had secretly infiltrated the racial justice demonstrations. And you know what? They were right. I'm Trevor Aronson, and I'm hosting a new podcast series, Alphabet Boys.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
Each season will take you inside an undercover investigation. In the first season of Alphabet Boys, we're revealing how the FBI spied on protesters in Denver. At the center of this story is a raspy-voiced, cigar-smoking man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
He's a shark, and not in the good badass way. He's a nasty shark.
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
For better or worse, it's I can just be me.
Totally. Not to interrupt your train of thought, but that was actually something I was going to get to later, where it was the notion that I think that people are attracted to whatever you do musically is because, clearly there's a through line where you're playing, aggressive, loud music, and sonically you're all in the same umbrella, but they're all different enough to where you could see certain people would not like the Chariot versus, maybe liking the 68. But at the same time, like, you yourself haven't really changed from the way that you not only present yourself, but just like the same sort of, raucous atmosphere and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I'm glad that you're able to express that and see yourself, the lines of that, because I think that's what, frankly, I think that's why people still care about you, because you are still you, if that makes sense.
Well, that's cool. I mean, I am who I am, and the guy that I am has always just been a guy who loves the live show and, wants, I love feedback, and I love, humans. I love, when I record, sonically, it's again, in a way, I'm not trying to put something false out there. So if you listen to the Chariot records, it's they're obviously very loose. They're not, we're human beings playing human music. It's not, copy paste. You play one riff. I mean, I've produced a handful of bands, and I've done a few, I've been around the block. So it's I've seen. Well, I've never produced a band like this, but I've seen bands go in and go record one riff perfect, and then copy paste. Just who cares about the drums? We'll beat detect it and make it perfect. And it's that's fine. That I get it. I understand that. But it's if you heard the Chariot pitch perfect, and then you went and saw their live show, I think there would be a disconnect there. You know what I mean? I think there would be a moment where you go, that recording I listened to, it wasn't, hey, let's try to get it as good as we could. It was a lie. You know what I mean? And
totally.
And that's why we never recorded like that. We always recorded, in a way that I felt represented us, and so if you listen to the recordings, they're a little sloppy. There's feedback everywhere. There's, and that again points to the idea of I'm not trying to, I don't know. I just, if you catch me off guard on the side of the street, I don't have to click into any pretend guy, I'm just Josh. and I think that's, for me, in my mental health, I think that, that's definitely a place that I'd rather live, and so whether it's, Norma Jean or the Chariot or 68, it's it's always that same guy who's contributing to or writing the music or being a part of it. So therefore it's gonna have that common thread, I believe,
Hey, pardon the interruption, but did you know that Mother's Day is a few days away? Have you done something for the mother in your life, whether it is, for my experience, I have a mother, and then I also am married to the mother of my son, which odd how that works out like that. But you need to don't just get any flower. Like if you're going to your average website that sells flowers, go to Bloom That. So bloomthat.com. And my wife was the recipient of one of these nice bouquets, or maybe I'm just putting words in her mouth, but I viewed it as nice. Kate, would you like to talk about your experience in regards to Bloom That?
It was very nice. My package arrived. It was easy to open. I quickly assembled it myself. The flowers themselves came in a nice burlap sack tied with a pretty yellow ribbon, which then I could put on the vase as decoration. And the flowers hadn't bloomed yet, so I got to enjoy that. And I liked it so much, I sent flowers to Raymond's teacher using the coupon code that came in the box. Yes, exactly. So this is, there was a lot of things that I learned about this company that just, make it far and above. Because, the focus of this podcast is to, support independent music artists, and companies. And Bloom That is exactly that. They are sourcing flowers from here in the United States, just outside of San Francisco. And you want the mother in your life to have a very positive experience. You don't want them to receive flowers and be like, oh, they were beautiful, even though in the back of their heads they were like, they was just okay. Because moms are going to be nice and they're not going to lie to you. But you need to go to bloomthat.com/words. And what you will get is you will get this beautiful handcrafted vase. My wife likes to say vase, but I like to say vase, make it sound fancy. And you'll also get some nice little caramel treats, which I think my mother has consumed them all. You did not. Them all, right? Yes. So please, bloomthat.com/words. And then, like I said, you'll get a beautiful bouquet. You will get a free vase or vase and caramel treats. Like, you can't go wrong. This package will make your mother love you. I will guarantee you, if you have a strained relationship, this will save your relationship. Well, maybe not, but you need to be doing more than just sending flowers once a year. But Bloom That will definitely put you in good graces with any of the mothers in your life. Or if you're just doing it just out of the goodness of your heart, and you get like, hey, the flowers will arrive a day before Mother's Day, and then you'll get something. Maybe you'll get another bouquet on Mother's Day as well. You could just double it up if you wanted to. But anyways, go to bloomthat.com/words, and you will get a free vase, caramel treats, and an amazing bouquet. So go do it. Happy Mother's Day.
And I know we're kind of jumping around here, but then the intersection of faith and Christianity and music, just because you guys, from a Norma Jean perspective, you existed, at the time when, the Christian metalcore scene was really coming into its own, built off the backs of, bands like Training for Utopia and Focal Point and stuff like that. How did you kind of start to initially approach getting into music? And like, did you have a household in which, your parents were like, okay with you bringing home, Slayer records, or was it one of those things where you had to kind of like listen to that on the sly, or you just didn't even listen to it at all?
Well, it's funny because I've been doing it long enough, and from such a young age, I think a lot of, and plus because I come straight out of the Bible Belt, so I think people just assume I grew up in this like Christian household, like going to church every Sunday and everything. And my parents were great parents, and my father's passed away now, but my mom, she's still a great woman, but it wasn't, we didn't grow up with that pressure on us or anything. It wasn't a Christianity is something that I found on my own in my own time, and it's something that I don't shy away from, but also it's hard to want to talk about over any sort of public forum, because there's just so many definitions that need to be given, and so many things that need to be, like, if I'm talking to one person, one at a time, one-on-one, it's like, cool, let's talk all you want, because I can clarify this, clarify that. But, through interviews and stuff in the past, it's like, it gets so difficult talking about my faith and my beliefs, because it's just so easily misconstrued, and it's so easily edited out, or it's so easily, you paint that broad stroke Christianity, and all of a sudden your brain goes to just some terrible people in the world that are claiming the same thing I am, and it's just like no.
I'm not like
we're
that.
not on the same boat, and like I love people, you know what I mean, and I love all people, and I'm not, I don't want to identify with people who hate or whatever, but so that's sort of a topic that I find myself just kind of reserving for me and for any kind of personal conversations. But having said that, getting into Norma Jean and playing with those things, I actually hated the, if you want to call it, the popularity of Christianity in music, because it felt like a fad, and it felt like, at the risk of quoting my own lyrics, it was a fashion, and it was something that was just here today, gone tomorrow. And obviously fast forward 2 years in any direction, and it was true, all of a sudden nobody cared anymore as far as, I mean, it was just, it's the same with like straight edge or whatever. Like obviously there's a handful of people that genuinely were just like, this is something I want and I need. But a whole bunch of other people were just like, that's cool, and it's like, let's click with these other people. And all of a sudden it just became this sort of, what was an expression of self,
personal
conflict and a personal choice, and sort of an expression of like, hey, the drunk jocks used to beat us up, and that's stupid, and here's my sort of expression of art to sort of help cope with that, and all of a sudden became this fashion trend. And that's unfortunate, but at the same time, I think Christianity and your beliefs and different things like that, I feel like that, just, people use the words like whatever, Christian hardcore or whatever, and it's just such a funny that it just became its own genre, because at the end of the day, I'm like, how is that a genre? How are your beliefs got their own, like, you don't talk about the Killers as like, Mormon rock or,
right.
Whatever, you know what I mean? Because it's just silly, because it just sounds insane when you say it like that. But for some reason it sort of took a life of its own, and it became what it became. And again, I hated being right there in the mix of it, because it just felt like yet another person jumping on the fashion train or whatever. And he teaches on. I'm not any better than anyone else, but at the end of the day, it was something that was genuine and true to me, and based on my journey in life and the things that I've been through. So it was hard to be a part of that and not, and they want to be like, no, but whatever, I'm for real or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, well, only time's going to make that a thing, and so again, I hate even saying all that, because it's like I'm no better than anyone else, but it's just, it was definitely a moment where I was like, I don't enjoy the fact that this is becoming so popular and fashionable, so I wrote some lyrics based on that.
Right. No, I totally get where you're coming from. I mean, I think it's one of those things where it's it's easy to market that stuff, because you're immediately going to have a listener base that's going to pay attention to it because it gets released on a certain label, or it sounds like the other bands that you would like. But then I always find it interesting, and I'm sure you experience this in many times, where people that didn't have the same upbringing as like you or I, where the notion of listening to a band that wasn't Christian was like, oh my God, that doesn't make any sense. And so they would have to these kids would have to find alternate versions of said band in the Christian world. And,
right.
The C-rate bands that came out of that. I think that's when it's just like, oh man, for years.
Which is it's another thing that just sorry to interrupt, but man, that is just such a heavy bummer on my heart. Just like any sort of like, I mean, again, it's like you're talking about something that's like very near and dear and personal to me. Like, I've been through a journey, and in that journey, this sort of, whatever you want to call it, light came out, and here it is, just like, oh, this is a Christian alternative to insert whatever band. It's like, what? As an artist, does that not just make you furious? Like create art for you, like today, for you, for right now, and like that. Oh my gosh, that's the worst thing ever. And like, I mean, whatever. I mean, but at the same time, like, I understand money is the end of is the all powerful, but at the end of the day, yeah, and it's such a bummer because the money comes from whoever, whether it's a label thing or whether it's the individual artist or whatever. It's just like money's always going to win, and it's an unfortunate thing to have to say, but at the same time, like as an individual, you can create your own victories and just going, hey, like I'm just creating art that's near and dear to me, and if you like it, that's awesome. Jump on board and we'll hang out. And if you don't, that's cool too. We don't have to be enemies. You know what I mean? You can just not like my band. That's super fine. There's plenty of people that don't,
Yeah.
But yeah, to go way back and answer your question, like I never had to hide anything or like I said, they were dropping me off at all these shows because I couldn't drive yet. So
you were fine.
There was never an issue. Yeah, there was never an issue of is mom going to hear Slayer come out of my room? It's like, no, she's absolutely going to hear it, because I'm turning it up way too loud.
Totally. So was Ludacris was that your first actual band that kind of got out and toured and stuff like that, or was there different iterations before that kind of played out but didn't make their name nationally?
Yep. Norma Jean is what I always refer to it as, but yep, that was our first, that was my first band.
Sorry. I don't mean
it's all good.
I don't mean to go deep into the catalog, but I just remember I was working.
What was our safety word again? No, I'm just kidding.
I know. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Norma Jean was your first band. You guys had a record that had a different name at one point, but
exactly. There you go. Yeah. Exactly.
But
no, I'm not. It is what it is. I mean, I think I made up that name in like 96 because I was drawing stuff and painting stuff, and I would just sign it, Ludacris or whatever, because I just thought the definition of that was, something about hilarious or overly hilarious or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And so I just would sign it that. And then when we started the band, like officially, it was just like, well, this name sort of already exists. And so I just kind of jumped into it with that name and started it with that name. And then, like real quickly, once we got picked up and people started kind of caring what we were doing, we were just like, this name sucks. And then, we were already on Solid State, and it was a very big chore to try and change it. But finally, the rapper from Atlanta also started getting bigger, and so we were like, sweet, like that's our way out. And so, we changed our name to Norma Jean, and that's there's that. So yeah, but it was.
But was that was
sorry.
No, it's
Go
okay.
on.
No, that's totally fine. But that was essentially your first band in which you experienced like the touring life and that sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, first band ever. Everything from hey, let's practice. Where is that going to happen? I don't know. Here we go to whoops, we got on a show out in Alabama, which is funny that you mentioned Training for Utopia, because some of our first couple shows were actually with Training for Utopia and Warlord.
Oh yeah, I remember those guys.
Really amazing bands. Yeah, and I mean, Training for Utopia is one of our favorites of all time, and then Warlord was amazing as well. And but Daniel, the drummer, who now plays in Every Time I Die, he was the youngest of us all, but he just called and was like, hey, I see they're coming through. We sound kind of like them. It'd be awesome to play. Like, and they were just like, okay. And that's it. That's all that would happen. And then he calls the venue in Alabama and says the same thing, and it worked. And he called the next venue and it didn't work. So we just went, to Alabama and played with them. And it was like, that was it. So that's our first out of state experience, but
yeah.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
I'm Lance Bass, and you may know me from a little band called NSYNC. What you may not know is that when I was 23, I traveled to Moscow to train to become the youngest person to go to space. And when I was there, as you can imagine, I heard some pretty wild stories. But there was this one that really stuck with me. About a Soviet astronaut who found himself stuck in space with no country to bring him down. It's 1991, and that man, Sergei Krikalev, is floating in orbit when he gets a message that down on Earth, his beloved country, the Soviet Union, is falling apart. And now he's left defending the Union's last outpost. This is the crazy story of the 313 days he spent in space. 313 days that changed the world. Listen to The Last Soviet on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
During the summer of 2020, some Americans suspected that the FBI had secretly infiltrated the racial justice demonstrations. And you know what? They were right. I'm Trevor Aronson, and I'm hosting a new podcast series, Alphabet Boys.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
Each season will take you inside an undercover investigation. In the first season of Alphabet Boys, we're revealing how the FBI spied on protesters in Denver. At the center of this story is a raspy-voiced, cigar-smoking man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
He's a shark, and not in the good badass way. He's a nasty shark.
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
That's fun. Was there, as you were starting to really dive into this subculture and go to shows and, form your first band and everything, you said your parents were supportive of you, but was there ever a point where they were just like, yo, Josh, like, this is some weird stuff you're into? Like, you're dyeing your hair, you're painting your nails black. Like, what's happening? Or was it generally kind of accepted in your household?
Yeah, my parents never cared. I mean, they were I've gathered enough throughout the years to say that they were probably hippies back in the day too. So I think they kind of gathered it. And my dad was in the Air Force for a bit, so the moment he got out, his hair went long immediately. And they never cared. Our rule in the house was kind of like, hey, make good grades. Like if you make good grades, you can do whatever you want. And it was all but an open rule. And it was all but just said bluntly, just like that. It was just basically like, education is important, so do that, and my parents are wonderful people, and every parent, well, not every parent, but a lot of parents, I think, really just want what's best for their kids, and so there was maybe, the smallest of hiccups where it went from, oh, you're in high school and you're doing this hobby, or it's probably treated like, or whatever, you're doing this thing that's interesting, and then all of a sudden once it kind of like shifted from, okay, well, now I've graduated high school and we're still touring and getting up to an age where like college should be a thing, and we're not doing college because we're still touring. Like there may have been a hiccup or two where it got to the point where it's just like, okay, like let's sit down and just chit chat about the fact of like, how long is this actually going to last? Like, is this really the thing you want to be, pouring your heart into and everything? But again, that just comes from a very realistic point of like, hey, like, be realistic about this, and we're just trying to do the best for you, and like, look out, and like college was like I said, education was a huge thing, so obviously college was a huge thing, and when I didn't go, I'm sure it kind of was just like a little bit of a like, oh boy, is he or are we setting him up to just enter this world of like whatever, and are we setting them up to enter this world of, living in a van down by the river? And it's like, well, yeah, but that's fine with me. I'm super down with, I'd rather live in a van down by the river and create art and, be able to do it than not, and if I ever have to get a real job, like to do my art, that's fine. I would do that, but, so, as everything does, I think it all sort of panned out as it did. And I had to sort of be like, look, this is the thing I want to keep doing, and who knows when the train's going to spit me out. But at the end of the day, like, if it's 3 years or if it's 5 years or if it's 10 years, it's going to be a fun ride, and it's something that I've always tried not, to have as few regrets in my life as possible, and try not to live my life based on fear, but based on the fear of maybe regret. And so, the idea of like, is it just going to spit you out once people stop caring? And it's like, well, yeah, obviously it will. You know what I mean? Like, we're all one bad album away from being forgotten forever. That's fine, but
right.
I'm not going to make my decisions based on the fear of what if people stop caring. It's like, if people stop caring, I'll still create music that I like, you know what I mean? And it's a very therapeutic thing, and mentally it kind of keeps me in a healthy space. And so, but the moment that the train kicks me off, it's like, well, cool, I'll go get a job then, and life will go on, and I'll figure something else out, or whatever. But at the end of the day, it's like I try, I never want it to be 60 years old looking back on, man, what if I would have just tried it, and what if I would have just kept going, like, what if I, so
yeah,
it's an interesting thought, and I know parents are people too, just trying to make it all make sense,
Yeah, like you said, usually if there's friction in the house when a kid is doing something that they don't understand, it's never from a place of like, I don't trust them. It's usually from a place of like, I hope that they're okay. I want them to be okay. And like you said, that
right.
It's from a place of love. Hey, pardon the interruption. And this sponsor may seem a little bit left of center, but I'm excited to tell you about it. It's called SmileDirectClub. And I have someone helping me out with this ad read. Kate, my wife, would you like to say something?
Hello, everybody.
So, SmileDirectClub is a invisible alignment system, and other competitors can cost up to like $5,000, but SmileDirectClub aligners are 70% less, and you can save even more with an insurance or a FSA. What's an FSA, Kate? Do you know what an FSA is? I don't. But you can save more with that. There's also 2 easy ways to pay. You can have a single payment of $1,700, which they also have the lab costs waive, or you can take advantage of SmilePay, which is just $250 down and then $99 a month for 17 months. No credit check required. Now, my wife, the reason she's on here is because she's the one that's going through this program. So you'll be hearing from us regularly as we go through this process. What did you think of the kit as it came and everything else that came with it?
It was really easy to order the kit. The kit arrived very quickly. The directions were easy to follow. There were even pictures if you needed visual clarification. And then it was easy to send the package off. Now, all packages are easy for me to send because you take care of it.
True.
But it was already all labeled, and all we had to do was close it up.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you hear about the notion of like, oh, doing some sort of dental work at home. It's like, enlivened system like that sounds terrifying. But this was just like, oh yeah, you pop it in your mouth and you mix the stuff, and like it seems daunting initially, but then once you go through one impression, it's like, oh, that's easy.
Yes, it wasn't bad at all.
Good. So you can get started with the at-home impression kit for only $95, and then it's covered by their Smile Guarantee. So if their aligners are not a good fit for you, you get your money entirely back. And better yet, the listeners of this show can save 50% off your evaluation costs with the special offer. So please visit SmileDirectClub and use the promo code WORDS, WORDS. And then if you or your children, 12 or older, and anyone that is interested, please go to SmileDirectClub, use the promo code WORDS, and you will get 50% off your evaluation kit. And it's only available in the United States, except North Carolina. I don't know why, but not North Carolina. But please, SmileDirectClub, use the promo code WORDS, tell them we sent you, and we'll tell you more about this as the process goes. Thank you, Kate.
You're welcome.
Something that I've noticed about that's a kind of a common through line with all the bands that you've played in is that, and I'm sure you've heard this term, but you guys are definitely a band's band, where it's like, bands like to take you out on tour because you're an easy hang, you're fun to be around, that sort of stuff. But then
it's funny.
Go ahead.
Go on.
No, I was just
going to say a band's band. That's a very that's a very nice way of being like, you never got that big, but bands love you, you know.
But John,
which is true,
but
funny.
But John, let me button this up, Josh, because I was actually going to tell you that you were more than that, because you actually have a draw where it's like, when you go out on tour, like, people cared about you, like you could do your own headlining shows and people would care, and then if you were added to a tour, your fans would come out to the show, because that's unique. Usually, like you said, the band's ban syndrome is bands like, honestly, this is no slight against this band, but this band is absolutely incredible, but while they played and while they were around, like, they just didn't gravitate towards many people. That band Code 7 from North Carolina was like,
oh yeah,
they
love that band.
They were a total band where, like, bands love them because they love to watch them, but, like, kids just didn't get what they were doing. But like I said, all your bands have kind of, they've combined both of those worlds, and that's a really hard thing to do.
Well, it's funny because we, like, two things. One thing, like, I've always been in smaller bands, which is super fine. Like obviously Norma Jean blew up to do a thing, but it was like, after I had left, and things were getting bigger and things were going upwards, and it's easy for me, and nobody understands this, but it's easy for me in my brain to when things start getting up, to want to sort of pull away. It's just my own sort of thoughts and ideas and ideals, and just sort of like, well, but while I was in it, we were always a modest band, and then the Chariot was always like it's funny because so many people just saw us on the farewell tour or saw us supporting some other bigger band, and so therefore I've had like full-on arguments where people, I'm like, well, the Chariot was always a smaller band, and they're like, what are you talking about? I saw you here on this tour, and it's like, yeah, that was with that band. And then they were like, well, I saw you on the farewell tour. And it's like, well, yeah, like, it's a farewell tour, but we were always a modest band, to say the least, but we we paid bills and everything was fine, so it's not a complaint of any sort, but it's funny because there's a huge compliment that comes with calling someone a band's band, because while, I mean, not that bands have it all figured out, obviously, but bands who tour a bunch and play with a bunch of bands and they hear music all the time, if they like your art, there's the tiniest bit of this that means something different than if your average person likes your band. And obviously I'm not in any way trying to insult every person that's like my band, but like, you take like top 40 radio and it's like, okay, there's some good artists, I'm sure, but at the end of the day, the people making the music, or at least making the decisions of the music, are business suited people who go A plus B equals $. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the fans. They care about them in the sense they care about dollars and they care about money, but it's like, let's just insert this formula, which is, A plus B and, whatever. And then that's it. And the moment it stops making money, they could care less. They're not going to try and, oh, let's keep it going. I think it's good. Oh man, I believe in this music. It's like, no, it's just money, and so therefore you're getting spoon-fed, the stuff, and eventually you grow a taste for it because it's just everywhere you go, you hear it, and big doses or small doses, and therefore you're getting, cultivated in a way to be like, oh, this is what I listen to now, or this is, top 40 or whatever. So that's the average sort of, person, or the average audience member or whatever. But then there's the, like, the few, and the I mean, people are making good livings now doing this type of music and stuff, but it's still, in compared to top 40 music, it's still the few and the proud, you know what I mean? The few people who go out and go, I searched this band. I mean, think about it. Think about if you like the Chariot, what that meant. That meant, I mean, now we have Spotify and Apple Music, but in the early stages, it's like, what that meant was, okay, you like this band, so are you just going to pop in your nearest, Best Buy and grab the album? No, you're going to pop in your nearest, like, whatever place, and you're going to look for it, and they're not going to have it, so you're going to pop in another place, and you got to go to the local cool like CD shop and hope that they have it, and if they don't, then you like whatever, download it illegally or whatever, which is totally fine because at least you're listening to it. But then at the end of the day, you've got to like figure out when they're coming, and if you find out they're coming, you got to go to the show. Like, it's all work on the audience members' part, you know. And so the fact that anyone liked anything ever blows my mind, you know, because
right.
It's work. You know what I mean? It's not the, you know, the proverbial MTV spoon feeding you, or the radio station just spoon feeding you, like, you know, like, oh, I'm telling you 900 times they're coming to this place at this time. It's like, no, you had to like find it out yourself and all that stuff. So I say all that to say that, like, basically, like, if someone says you're a band's fan, like, it's a huge compliment, because what it means is like this band who, you know, has toured around and heard music every single day, seen a million bad local bands, a handful of good local bands, toured with every band you can imagine. Like, they like your art. Like, okay, well, that means something totally different than if someone's just pulling out like 5,000 kids every single night. Not to insult anyone that's pulling out 5,000 kids every single night. It's just, the idea is there's a difference there. You know, there's a difference that to saying like, hey, these other guys that are creating all this art and doing all the same struggles you're doing, and some are better than others and some are bigger than others, but it's like they are giving you somewhat of a stamp of approval. Like, that means a lot, you know, and it's super cool to hear, and it's cool. I mean, it's just you know, I don't create art for other people, you know. I make music for the stuff that I want to hear and stuff that I like, and I think people kind of catch on to that and kind of enjoy that, and it's also, you know, I'm just another guy in a sea of people, so therefore it's like, you know, if I'm making music for something that I want to hear, you can fully assume there's probably someone else out there that is also into hearing it or whatever, you know. And so it's just a thing that, you know, I've heard it from time to time about, you know, a band's band, and to me it's a giant compliment, you know, because we weren't made for the masses. You know, we weren't creating music that would ever be on the radio, or creating music that, you know, that was ever, it wasn't meant to be like easily digestible. You know, it's something that's meant to sort of whatever,
live on the fringes,
be thought provoking or whatever. Yeah, exactly. And at the end of the day, like, that's the stuff I always enjoyed, and so that's what we, you know, sort of created or whatever. And it's cool. It's interesting. We did a tour one time. I won't mention the band, but it was a really big tour, like really, really big and really different for us. And it was cool, but nobody liked it. The band themselves did, but nobody else. Like every single day we sold like 3 shirts or whatever. And that's a real, you know, blow to the bank when you're not selling merch. But fast forward, I was able to be in the Chariot for long enough that we'd play a show and someone would be like, hey man, you know, that was really good stuff. And I was like, awesome. And like, yeah, first time I saw you was on this tour. And you go, weird, why are you here? Like, nobody liked us on that tour. And they go, oh yeah, well, I didn't either, but I kind of just like remembered y'all, and like now you're like one of my favorite bands. And it's like, that's cool, man. That's awesome. That, like, you know, fast forward 3 years or whatever, and you're I don't know, your tastes change, or maybe you're just wanting something thicker, something, you know, more, I don't know, like, you know, more thought provoking or whatever. And so again, that was something that was like a huge compliment, and it was really cool to have been able to be in a band or be in this industry long enough to see that result and see that outcome, you know. And so it was kind of worth doing that tour, because I heard that all the time. So many people would be like, yeah, I hated it that night, but it was hard to forget, you know. And fast forward 3 years or 2 years or 4 or whatever, and we it was pretty, now it's something I love, and I've found out all these other bands because of it, and it's really cool, so.
Yeah, well, that's what you want in terms like that. You want to be the kind of gateway band where it's like people don't like it initially, but they're kind of like, like there's something about that was cool, whether it was like the, aggressive nature, them jumping into the crowd or whatever, and like it's same exact principles as you had when you were, watching Bush perform for the first time or whatever. It's like
exactly
same notion. You strike me as a person too that there's two last things I wanted to ask before I let you go. One of them being the fact that you don't strike me as ever being the proverbial business person of the band. Like, you have decisions that you make and everything like that, but you were maybe never the person in any of their projects that was like, all right, I'm going to be the one booking the shows. I'm going to be the one, that's kind of doing this. You seem definitely rooted in the, the artistic endeavors of the band. Am I correct in that assumption, or is it one of those things where you dabble in it, but maybe you don't, take the, not saying that you're not interested in that side of things, but, you have people that care about one thing more than the other, and that's just, something that happens.
You're absolutely correct on that in every way. I'm the least business person I know, maybe to a fault. Well, definitely to a fault. But I even I don't want to dive down this rabbit hole, but there's definitely been business decisions where I get all artsy and introspective and start, and sometimes when you walk away with nothing, and there was a big chunk of something to take, people sort of think that, they that could be looked at as a very dumb thing, and probably was, but at the end of the day, sometimes you just get sort of tricked up in your brain and in your mind, and you sort of think to yourself, like, that's not why I started this, or that's not why I did this, or whatever. But yeah, I'm definitely more of the, like, Hail Mary, let me just sling it all out there, and the few people that, it kind of grabs along the way, like, like, that's cool. And as long as I can keep paying my bills, then I'll be happy. And the moment I stop paying my bills, I'll also be happy. I'll just have to sort of figure something else out, but yeah, I've never been, I'm super not, I pretend to be one. I fake it, I fake it like sometimes well and sometimes not. But I've with 68, it's in a more healthy place because I have a manager. The Chariot, we didn't have a manager or whatever. It was just me. And so with 68, I have a manager and I have a business manager, and so maybe there's like a lot more stabilization as far as some of those things go. And because you need that, and you also need to accept the fact that there's art is one thing, and then with every art comes a little bit of business, and so it's just like, the more I don't have to do with that, the more I can just focus on the thing that I love and the thing that keeps me grounded, which is art, and so I've found that, like, it's definitely healthy. Anyone listening to this, if you just find yourself like hard shifted to the art side, it's like there may be wisdom in finding someone who's a whole lot more on the other side to just sort of well round you off. But also, that's a very dangerous thing to say as a broad stroke, because you can get really ripped off, and because you're just so focused on the art that but at the end of the day, it's like that's not my forte. That's not where I just want to create, and hope that, like I said, a few people catch it along the way, so.
Yeah, no, I like that. And the last thing I want to hit on was more in relation to kind of something that you were talking about earlier in regards to, how you can view through the prism of your life a little better what your parents did, once you become a parent yourself. And, you have 2 kids, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, just because you do still live in this chaotic nature of, going out on tour and returning home and then getting used to being home, and then all of a sudden you're used to being home and then you go out on tour again. How have you kind of, balanced those two, dualities that exist within life? Because, that's not easy to maintain relationships and then, clearly be a father and show up.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's very easy. Just very, very easy to just see only the negative of that, and like being like, oh man, you got to go for such a long time, or oh man, like what about this? What about that? And it's like, well, that's easy to look at, but what about the exact flip positive of that, where it's like, hey, I get to tour and do the thing that I love, but also when I get home, it's like I'm not just sitting alone in an apartment, like. No offense to anyone who is, but it's just like, it's nice to just come home and have, a family and friend there, and so for me, like, it's like, I don't have any answers. I don't know if what I'm doing is going to have long-term effects on me or them or anything else. But at the end of the day, it's like, I would love to pretend I live in a world where it's like, hey, I can say something along the lines of like, hey, like, yeah, follow your dreams, but that's where everybody stops. Everybody goes, oh, follow your dreams. And it's like, well, you got to work for that. You know what I mean? Like it's like, we were raised up in an age where it's like, you can do anything. You can change the world. It's like, no, you can't. Not without work ethic and not without the ability to go, hey, I've got to, stand on my own 2 feet and, march over to this thing and start creating or start writing or start touring or start whatever the thing is, and so I would love to be, some sort of example to instead of saying one thing but doing another. It's like I'd love to, hopefully looking back on all of it, they were, anyone involved would be able to look and go, oh man, like he had this thought and then went out and worked for it, went out and busted his butt and tried to make it a thing and tried to, keep it going as long as he could. And, I'd love to pretend that the moment that it all wraps up, I'm able to stay, healthy minded and realize that was just one phase that, we all knew was going to wrap up. I'm not creating music to be the Rolling Stones or U2 or anything. So it's like there's a day coming where it's just like, cool, well, that's that, and now what's the next thing, and I'll cross that bridge when I get there. But for now, it's like I'm having a good time and very grateful to have been doing it for as long as I have. But at the end of the day, I don't want to say one thing like, oh, follow your dreams, or you can change the world, or you can, and then, not do anything and then just sit around. It's like I want my actions to speak louder than my words and be able to be like, hey, like there's a lot of people out there. They have a lot of different beliefs than you, and they're still just people, and it's cool to connect, and it's cool to learn, and it's cool to walk amongst everybody and just be able to hang out. You know what I mean? And it's cool to be able to like pursue an avenue where, you can do something you love for a living. A lot of people, everyone puts all the glory and all the power and money, but I like to throw a lot of that glory and a lot of that power on doing what you love. I put a price on that. I put a thought on that. It's like I wake up every day and days where I've got some 18-hour drive that, in the middle of wherever to X amount of kids, it's like I still love what I'm doing. So it's like not, that's worth a ton of money to me. You know what I mean? To just be able to do what I love and to do what I believe in, and still, be able to travel and do whatever. And like I said, it'll all wrap up at some point, but might as well not worry about that's, I'll let future Josh deal with that,
Yeah.
And so, so it's cool to be able to, hopefully live in a world where all of that means something to the people that are most important to me, and hopefully they'll be able to look back on that and go, oh, he didn't just say those words, he actually lived it out, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's really, really, really important, because ultimately you become a better partner, a better father, because like you said before, you're happy, and that's a spot that, not many people can find themselves in. So, but, Josh, thank you so much for hanging out, dude. I've been looking forward to this chat, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. It was great. Thank you very much for having me.
That's what's up. That was Josh. I was about to call him George for a second. It's like, that maybe I shouldn't read someone else's name like right before I record these outros, right? I would like to just take a moment and thank everybody again for listening to the show. Like I said before on a past couple episodes, we're approaching a 5-year anniversary, and I'm not going to make a big deal out of it. I mean, it's one of those things where, I could have some pomp and circumstance and kind of pat myself in the back, which I honestly do on a weekly basis, where I'm like, all right, man, got another one at the door. This is awesome. I love it. But just thank you for listening to this thing. I really, really appreciate it. And words don't do it justice in regards to the sort of connections that I've made with people in regards to the just how meaningful the show is in their lives, whether it's something that people listen to once a month or whether it's something that people look forward to once a week. I'm just glad to be here and hang out and be that little voice in your ear being like, hey, music is important. You should still care about it, or you should still stay really involved with it. So thank you very much. And thank you very much to Jenny, who hooked this interview up. And thank you very much for Josh for his time. And the music, as always, is Lowercase Noises. You need to get on his new record, lowercasenoises.com. You can pre-order that thing, and it's beautiful. You'll love it. And then what else do I need to tell you? Oh, yes, the guest next week is, he's what I like to call a secret punk. This is a person who is very heavily involved in the journalism side of things. He hosts an amazing podcast of his own called Longform, which basically he speaks to people who are journalists in some capacity and really gets into the nitty-gritty of what they do. So Aaron Lammer. And he also does a pretty cool podcast that I've only listened to 1 or 2 episodes because, frankly, the subject matter is not really for me. It's called Stoner. But, Aaron Lammer is on the show this week. Or not this week. Well, yeah, technically this week because you're listening to this after the fact. But anyways, that's that. And you should have a good rest of the week. Go outside, get some sun, do some walks, you spend some time with the ones you care about, and hug a person, right? How about that? That's your homework. Whoever you see next after you listen to this show, like just give a hug to. Hopefully they're not a stranger, or hopefully it's a person that you actually like. But see what you can do about that. All right. All right. Until next week, please be safe, everybody.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Leftovers, or the DMV,
Number 97.
or house cleaning, or Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
In 1967, Joseph Stalin's only daughter flees Russia for her new home, America.
Hello to everybody. I am very happy to be here.
That story alone is worthy of a podcast, but Svetlana is about what comes next, and it's the craziest story I've ever heard. It has KGB agents, a Frank Lloyd Wright commune, weird sex stuff, 3 Olgas, 2 Svetlanas, and 1 neurotic gay playwright. That's me. Listen to Svetlana on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
When my daughter ran off to hop trains, I was terrified I'd never see her again, so I followed her into the train yard.
This is what it sounds like inside the boxcar.
And into the city of the rails. There I found a surprising world, so brutal and beautiful that it changed me. But the rails do that to everyone.
There is another world out there, and if you want to play with the devil, you're going to find them there in the rail yards.
I'm Danelle Morton. Come with me to find out what waits for us in the city of the rails. Listen to City of the Rails on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. Or cityoftherails.com.